This is San Francisco.
It's Toshio, and today we're going to talk about the proto-police company known as Urban Alchemy, which is essentially a private police force that was incubated in San Francisco. It started in San Francisco, but it's one of these local entrepreneurial innovations that has been exported to other cities, and that list now includes LA, Portland, and Austin, Texas. What do I mean by proto-police? Proto-cops are basically the cops without the badge. They conduct cop-like duties, and there are so many layers of proto-police in San Francisco. Urban Alchemy is just one of them. In Urban Alchemy's case, they are paid to harass poor and unhoused people so the cops don't have to. The proto-police force, known as Urban Alchemy, is a grift that exists because they've had a no-bid contract with the city for what will soon amount to $100 million. If you've been on the streets of Central SF, you've probably seen Urban Alchemy proto-cops standing around on their phones, perhaps with their walkie-talkies beeping loudly, wearing camouflage jackets like they're in a war. Also on those jackets is their logo, which is an eye inside a pyramid. And it's one of the reasons that the organization has been described as a cult. Before I play the conversation with Norma and Brooke, I'll give a little history of the company. Its founder is named Lena Miller, who was brought up in Potrero Hill, not in the projects in Potrero. She comes from the fancier side of the hill. San Francisco has its own Rachel Dolezal in Lena Miller, who is white, but identifies as black, as an ex-boyfriend of Miller's told a local news site. Rachel Dolezal, you might remember, is another white woman from Spokane, Washington, who became famous for claiming to be black and Native American and ended up leading her local chapter of the NAACP. From jump, Lena Miller pitched the idea of Urban Alchemy as you would with any tech startup. She calls it a franchise enterprise, meaning she wanted to create something she could ship out to other cities. Lena Miller shares an ex-boyfriend with the mayor, London Breed. That ex-boyfriend is Mohammed Nuru, who is in federal prison currently for bribery and corruption charges that came out in the FBI sting operation that has taken out not just Mohammed Nuru, but a bunch of local politicians over the past couple of years. Mohammed Nuru was the director of the Department of Public Works under London Breed and previous mayors, and he's handed a lot of multi-million-dollar contracts to enterprises like Urban Alchemy that are run by his friends, or in the case of Lena Miller, his ex-girlfriend. Nuru is still listed as on the board of another one of the nonprofit enterprises that Miller founded and directs. Lena Miller pitched Urban Alchemy as an alternative to police as a way for the city to interact with unhoused people. The only thing is the city already has multiple departments supposedly acting in this role. In addition to Department of Public Works workers, there are other proto-cop organizations like community ambassadors that are run by the community benefit districts and the homeless outreach team, the HOT team, just to name a couple of city-funded proto-police forces. Lena Miller says Urban Alchemy trains its people to address trauma, addiction, and mental illness, although there's not really a sign of that training, as Brooke and Norma will talk about. Urban Alchemy has spent a decent amount of its millions in funding toward its PR, its public relations, to give it the sound of something that liberal people in liberal cities could get behind. For example, one quote from its promo materials is, "We believe that calling the police shouldn't be the default answer to poverty and desperation." Urban Alchemy is also sold as a source of jobs for people who have few choices. Most of the actual proto-cops you'll see standing on the street in Urban Alchemy gear in the Tenderloin were recruited inside a jail or a halfway house and then basically given this one option to work as an urban alchemist. Cities are paying Urban Alchemy a lot to have its people stand around on the street corners acting as cops to, sort of make people stop using public space. And to hire Urban Alchemy is not cheap. San Francisco's budgeted $22 million for the latest year for Urban Alchemy's services in the Tenderloin, and the city of Portland just spent $50 million for Urban Alchemy to run some tent encampments in Oregon. The San Francisco Civil Grand Jury, which is this oversight body made of 19 SF residents, put out a report finding in June that the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing in SF will spend about $2 billion on more than 300 homeless-related nonprofit contracts by 2030. And they also found that most of that $2 billion will be wasted. And the jury's top example of waste, administrative waste, was Urban Alchemy. The grand jury held it up as this example for how the city is funneling all the funding for homelessness into these resource drains, these grifts. Brooke and Norma will talk more about Urban Alchemy and what the wasted millions of dollars could be going to. Norma Azucar is an activist who has lived in the Tenderloin for many years, also works with the Tenderloin People's Congress, and Brooke Lober is currently teaching in the Gender and Women's Studies department at UC Berkeley and has for a couple decades worked in harm reduction, including many years in the Tenderloin. They met working on a needle exchange program in the Tenderloin. Maybe y'all could fill in the blanks and tell me if I got that right.
So Norma actually works at a very busy syringe access site where in 2 hours you could see 80 people coming through the door and getting all kinds of hygienic, harm reduction supplies.
We have 3 sites that we give out supplies. We do Willow Alley. We work out of a van, and we have street medicine come and join us, and they treat people for emergency stuff, people that are afraid to go to the doctor, that kind of thing. And they'll see them in the van. And I also work at the Hope Center, doing harm reduction as well. And on Friday nights at 234 Eddie. It's a very, very busy site. And, we serve anywhere from 60 to 80 people every Friday. On Tuesdays, we've served as many as 145 people in 2 hours. So
that is
insane.
Crazy. That is insane. And I mean, for this crew to be able to do that work is just huge. I mean, that's really really amazing.
When I used to go to the harm reduction site on Eddy Street, maybe you see 20 people, but Brooke made it so it exploded with people, and now we see 80 people regularly, in 2 hours. So
the Tenderloin is sort of being positioned as ground zero in this kind of a new war on drugs, like a revamped war on drugs that the city is trying to fight.
War on poor people is what it is.
Yeah, you knew where I was going with that, because it's really it's not about the drugs, it's about the people who happen to use them or even just be around them, especially unhoused people. People generally who are using public space seem to be a target.
Exactly. And the sad thing is that they brought in the highway patrol people to fuck with people here,
Right.
As if the police isn't enough. They brought another bunch of assholes to deal with it.
Yeah, a huge part of this story is how many layers of police currently exist in the Tenderloin. Right now, various forms of policing are being run. In addition to the SFPD, there's, of course, the sheriff. There is, as you mentioned, Norma, the highway patrol has been brought in. There's
That business district, right? Or are you talking about DPW?
The ambassador.
The ambassadors, right. The community ambassadors. That's another group.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually the community ambassadors, the business group, and DPW. They're all here.
Yeah. In addition
They
to
help no one.
For sure. Yeah. In addition to the BART police also exists in the Tenderloin. The UC police, because UC Hastings or UC Law is here. The mayor invited in the National Guard a couple months back. And then there's also the Park Service. Parks Service Rangers.
I think we need more assholes to come into the neighborhood, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So what is that? I want to say that's eight layers of police, including the policing service we're going to talk about in Urban Alchemy.
I wish to have their job. They sit around and play on their phones and eat and get paid. Hey, help no one. They nothing, you know. They look bothered if you ask them to help you with everything, you know. This one woman overdosing, and I Narcan her, and I set her up, but I have to go to work, so I said, can you please keep an eye on her? Like
For people who don't know, maybe you could describe like what was your first experience with Urban Alchemy?
Well, they police the block that I work on at the Hope Center. So they're there, just sitting around, playing on their phones, eating food, and they help no one with anything. They just stand around. That's all they do.
People who visit the Tenderloin may be able to catch them as a result of the camo uniform that they all wear, evoking this sort of like war on the Tenderloin. They use these icons of pyramids that I'm not really sure how that fits in. I've heard it described as like cult-like.
It's probably Mason related, you know?
Yeah, it does have that Masonic kind of look to the pyramids that are used as their logo.
And I saw that, it's like, oh, what are they, Masons, you know?
Well, that's like kind of something that they talk about, which I think is one of a number of things about this organization that's especially weird, is they don't really say what they do. Mm-hmm. It's the language that they talk about what they do is very
vague.
It's very vague, but they use the word alchemy, like they're doing some type of magic, like they turn base metal into gold.
That's why the Mason thing came to mind. You know?
They've got that freaky eye symbol. I think that actually to me is one aspect of their work that I find like the camouflage and also like their hiring practices, which I could talk about. I think it's intimidating. I think it's meant to be intimidating because you can't really understand it.
And also we've tried, nobody knows what they're doing. I mean, ask them, you get just 10 people, you get 10 different answers, you know?
Yeah, and so before long, I mean, it's going to be about $100 million that the city will have spent on these contracts with Urban Alchemy. I'll give a short summation of what I understand Urban Alchemy to be, and you all can chime in whenever you think of any additions. But from my perspective, they're basically a company that offers private police that cities can hire. They started in San Francisco. The company is already in LA, Portland, and Austin. They have contracts with all of those cities.
They have a very posh office too.
They have a posh office on Market Street that is in, I guess it's the old...
I think they train bartenders in that place.
Ah, right. Yeah, the bartending school. And so now they filled it out with this Urban Alchemy headquarters. Advertises itself as a one-stop shop where cities and police departments can offload the policing and basically harassment of poor and unhoused people to this third-party service known as Urban Alchemy. In their own words, quote, "We're a social enterprise that engages with situations where extreme poverty meets homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. When a neighborhood, street, or intersection earns a reputation as a place to avoid, we turn it around." So there's that alchemy, that magic, I guess, that they're trying to evoke.
All bullshit, yeah. I see them every day and they do nothing. I walk past them, I wish I had your job.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, and what the company, it's ostensibly set up as a nonprofit, but what they offer, it doesn't come cheap. San Francisco, again, just this year budgeted another $22 million on top of about $50 million.
You want to hear a joke? This is what happened. The mayor supposedly granted us $3.5 million for projects that we wanted to implement in the Tenderloin. Well, they went through this whole sham of voting and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, they gave the money to Urban Alchemy and to the ambassadors. None of our projects got funded. So.
You're doing work that is actually saving lives, whereas what Urban Alchemy does, I guess, they're saving the eyes of rich people from having to see the grief that they themselves caused by hoarding all the wealth.
Yeah, I can tell you about a couple things that happened when I was directing this program down here, because it was at the end of 2021 when London Breed came down to the Tenderloin, and she had this public appearance at Dalda's Market, which was like right across the street from where we were working at the syringe access program. And what I remember from that, and the video is out there online, but what I remember her saying was, if you're using drugs out on the street, we are going to make life hell for you. And after that, she did a press, and she's kind of famous for swearing. She says that, she's kind of using some curse words. Then she gave a similar speech, but a little bit more refined at City Hall not long after. At that point, and I think maybe starting in late 2020, I'm actually not sure when it started. Urban Alchemy was running the tent site at Civic Center. So they were basically in charge of harassing people at the tent site. And at the program that we worked at, we got some complaints about that. People were having their belongings stolen, right? And things that were happening, like tents getting ruined, and then people had to provide their own tents. It almost was like there were sweeps that were happening inside of the camp, because people would have their tents stacked on pallets, and Urban Alchemy would be like, "Oh, we have to power wash here. Yeah. We need you to move all your stuff." So it almost felt like there were people who were leaving that tent city just kind of saying, "Why would I be here? Why wouldn't I just be on the street?" Exactly. If we're basically getting harassed, getting our stuff stolen, particularly women complaining about sexual harassment at that time, right? There's no oversight that I know of. So
this is like a kind of official encampment, like that the city was running.
Authorized.
Yeah, on a parking lot. They opened it during like early pandemic. And it was about $60,000 per year that they were spending for essentially a 10 by 10 spot where you could set up your tent. And obviously, $60,000 would get you a couple of years' rent at just about anywhere in the city.
Mm-hmm. So then what I saw was like, the situation in the Tenderloin is, I want to say, having worked here for a long time, and Norma's lived here for a long time, but like, it's kind of same old, but maybe things were more visible in a way, or maybe there's a plan for gentrification or development that they wanted to clear things out more quickly. So London Breed tried her emergency proclamation. And I think this was like November of 21. And at that point, I was on a call with like all the heads of the nonprofits, the service nonprofits that do syringe access and that type of work. And the Department of Public Health, with a representative from the Department of Emergency Management. And on that call, they said, like, the Department of Emergency Management and the Department of Public Health, talking to all these nonprofits, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, glad everybody was there. And they're like, look, the mayor is going to dedicate some funding, and none of you can argue about this. They framed it almost in terms of like emotional well-being, like everybody meditate for a minute, breathe. We don't want you to be reactive right now. but we're going to be making this one-stop shop Tenderloin Center on Market Street.
Vintage Center.
And Health Right 360 is going to run it. And Vitka was there, the CEO of Health Right 360. And Urban Alchemy is doing the security. And y'all don't get to argue about that.
Oof. So these are no bid contracts the city is handing over to, as we know, these are friends of politicians to provide what service they offer. It's unclear because they're not doing the life-saving work that...
They don't even carry Narcan for overdoses. I've asked them, we don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are people supposed to do in situations when they are having emergencies?
Mm-hmm. Don't go to Urban Alchemy because they don't do shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, they're standing on the corner, again, wearing the camo. They got their walkie-talkies. There's the beeping of walkie-talkies that you'll hear if you walk any amount of blocks in the Tenderloin. Between the three of us, we have no idea really what they do apart from standing around and sucking up resources from the city. Brooke and Norma, have you both seen the emergency that is happening in the Tenderloin?
Causing the emergencies. They're making them, they're sweeping people, they're harassing people, so they're causing all these emergencies to happen. It didn't happen when these people weren't here. And one thing I want to know is that where's all the money that's supposed to be going for the unhoused? Where the fuck does that money go? I don't see anything happening. It's millions of dollars being allocated for that. It's a total scam.
I mean, I think that one of the things that occurs to me about it, I have a very close friend who's been incarcerated the last couple of years. And a lot of what they talk about with Urban Alchemy, they kind of try to speak to people like me who care about incarcerated people and what happens to incarcerated people upon reentry, right? And they say, well, we're giving jobs. We're giving these really needed jobs. For me, I feel like it's an extension of the prison industrial complex. My friend who's incarcerated, he had a vocational. He was learning how to be a janitor, getting paid $10 every 2 weeks, right? For going out nights and learning how to run those machines. To me, Urban Alchemy is like a similar, lowest level presented as an opportunity. I don't find it to be an opportunity. When you're saying that, okay, people were formerly incarcerated, maybe they had a life sentence, and now we're going to let them police basically the areas that they themselves, right, are potentially either from or going to, right? Their own reentry programs are also located here, right? And relying on a kind of cultural sense that these are the tough guys.
I've seen money exchange, from Urban Alchemy to clients, selling shit. So,
that's the other thing is that people are not, people are gonna use their position and do whatever they're gonna do. Right. Cops do it, right? Exactly. So they're part of the street life here. They are part of it.
Not to help. Not to help.
I had a conversation with a woman who was like, my son went to the Tenderloin Center to get help. And he talked to somebody at the front door and they didn't know where he could get help. And I'm thinking, well, was the person at the front door Urban Alchemy? Because they're not going to be able to help you like a harm reductionist can. They're not actually doing harm reduction work.
They're not trained to do anything. They're really not trained to do anything.
Right, which is exactly what the company alleges that they're doing is training people who are inside of jails in most cases or halfway houses. And this is an opportunity for them to get some work time. They're also supposed to be this sort of help or sort of like the in-between for unhoused people and cops, this barrier.
It's another layer of harassment for poor people. That's all that is.
A lot of these nonprofits that you've been working with, they're operating on much smaller budgets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, to be honest, within all of the service nonprofits, there's a struggle over resources, right? We always want more resources to be going to the frontline workers and the people who we serve. And I'm not particularly here to defend that form. At the same time, like if what we see out here is a humanitarian crisis that really is increasing, and it is increasing, and it has to do with the drug supply. It has to do, I believe, with poverty and the housing market being inaccessible. And honestly, I think it also has to do with trauma and feelings of isolation. One of the reasons why we saw overdoses go up during the pandemic is because people feel isolated. Our society is like a hard place to live.
And then you criminalize drug use, and then people have to hide and use that shit by themselves. And then they overdose, and there's nobody there to help them out. I mean, it's ridiculous, man. Huh?
So, like, what should be happening is we should be taking the things that work and growing them.
Universal healthcare.
Yeah, that's actually what we need. And syringe access and what has come from it is a very crucial component. Yeah. Right. And it is actually the best way to get Narcan out and other things right now, although we do need universal health care. And actually we need safe supply. Like the drug supply is poisoned. Something has to change with what's going on with the street market.
You know, if people need services around ODing, if they need clean needles, where can they go in the Tenderloin?
Well, there's a lot of places, you know, in the Tenderloin. You have Blythe, you have St. Anthony's, you have St. James. You know, we're around 3 times a week. Blythe is every day, you know, and they give out syringes and glassware. St. Anthony's, they do clothing and food and all that good stuff. You know, we do harm reduction, 3 shifts, 3 times a week. You know, a couple of hours every day, every day per shift. You know, so we're out here, you know, and we give out supplies, you know, with no real limit, you know.
Links to all of these places in the show notes. Links to all of these places. Thanks for listening to Sad Francisco, which is a podcast produced by Toshio Moronic and Caitlin Wood. If you like the show, you can go to patreon.com. Thanks for listening to Sad Francisco, which is a podcast Francisco to help cover Moronic and Caitlin Wood, editing and transcriptions for the show. Patreon.com. See you next time. /Sad Francisco. Francisco to help cover the editing and transcriptions for the show. See you next time in Sad Francisco.